I know we've all been through a lot, and in particular, of course, the victims' families, and our hearts go out to all of them affected by the massacre, the terrible massacre that happened in the summer in Southport. And I know you all join with me in sharing and sending those condolences. It was such an unconscionably evil act that we just want to look away. We want to put it in a drawer and forget it happened. But I don't think we can, because to my mind anyway, and I know that, you know, half the population might be emitting a silent groan as I embark on this subject, I just feel that a big part of the story has not been looked at. And it's the fact that it was little girls. It's just really simple for me, this. And what does that tell us? And what does that mean? How do we bend our society to shape around that fact? Or how do we bend our laws to prevent what happened in Southport? So when I listened, as I did, to the entirety of the judge's sentencing remarks, and he was called Goose, and I'm not going to make a joke about that, because he what a terrible thing to sit through. But then Keir Starmer afterwards came out and said something like that we needed to change the definition of terrorism. So the question is, we had the justice who was Goose, but was the law an ass in this case? And could the law have been better rendered to prevent what happened? So the perpetrator wasn't guilty of terrorism. So what was it then? Just a communal garden massacre of little girls, and we just all say move on, and it's just one bad apple? I think that is missing the story slightly. Just because there was no political or religious or racial element to it, therefore didn't go into the terrorism bucket, we leave ourselves struggling as to trying to establish the motivation of this young man who was just short of 18 when he perpetrated his massacre. My point is, he didn't murder random people. He didn't go to a boys' club. He targeted females. That's not terrorism, according to the definition. But in my mind, just as the Manchester Arena bombings did in 2017, in which 10 girls under the age of 20 lost their lives, including one aged 8, there is a gender component. I'm not saying it's a jihadi gender component, even though, of course, the Abedi brothers were jihadi. He wasn't, although he did have a CIA analysis of a banned terrorism manual, of course. Doesn't go into the bucket that we call terrorism because of that. So the question I have is, should there be some sort of prevent then for femicide, for extreme misogyny? This is something that Yvette Cooper has already flagged up, and I wonder if you think that is now necessary. 03456060973. So I'm not here to talk about the sentencing or the death penalty. I'm not particularly interested. As far as my takeaway from the sentencing was, he will never walk free. He's in there for 51 years. And there's, I don't think, any snowball's chance in hell that a parole board will let him walk free. I don't want to talk about whether and how he could buy a knife off Amazon. I think that's a complete sideshow. I lived in America. I went to Walmart once. You could buy assault weapons in Walmart. Do we blame Walmart for school shootings? No, we don't. I don't blame the fact that a tech bro Musk owns Twitter, where apparently he sourced a lot of his self-radicalizing material. I don't regard the tech bros and the tech giants as responsible. I think they are part of the picture, of course, because social media is part of every picture now. But my question is, how do we define and how do we refine the law to accommodate the actions of this evil, toxic, misogynistic, Islamist-adjacent incel who went out of his way not to target a boxing gym, a Boy Scouts troop, but he targeted a Taylor Swift dance class he'd seen on Instagram, a class that he knew would only be attended by women, taken by women, and attended by girls. by little girls. And the template, in my mind, this doesn't make it Dunblane, but the template is Manchester Arena. And the little Swifties of Southport were the victims, and nobody actually made much of the fact that Taylor Swift's tour was then targeted, of course, and concerts cancelled because of the Islamist threat. So when I said Islamist adjacent, that's what I'm talking about. He targeted a Taylor Swift dance class, then her concert was targeted by Islamists. Leanne Lucas took the class, the dance teacher, and she actually appeared in person. And she said it, as far as I was concerned. She said, he targeted us because we were women and girls and because we were vulnerable, easy prey. He targeted little girls who wanted to be like Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift. Where does it leave us when it comes to this sort of atrocity? I'm floundering. I don't see how changing the law really to include a definition of terrorism, to include extreme misogyny or femicide, really helps. But maybe you disagree, and maybe you have better ideas than the Prime Minister. 0345 6060 973. Back to Southport quickly. The evil murderer killed 3 little girls. He tried to kill 8 or 10 more. He would have killed them all, the judge said. The injuries 6-year-old Bebe King and 7-year-old Elsie Dot Stancombe suffered were so severe they stood no chance, and they died inside the building. 9-year-old Silva Aguiar managed to get out. She ran outside and she collapsed. She died the next day, of course. But as they fled, he chased them, stabbing them in the back as they tried to escape. I mean, these details just break you. One parent said his daughter was so horrifically injured, he didn't recognise her. He's inside for 52 years. I hope he dies in prison. So, I mean, Kemi's statement that we needed a call in the change of the law to allow judges more discretion, I think was redundant. He is going to die in prison. It was a waste of space. So the politicians, Kemi's come up with a statement that I think is redundant. Has Keir Starmer come up with a statement that's redundant, that we need to change the terrorism law? I mean, could he ever have been stopped? Could any law have stopped him? Because he seemed to fall between every single crack. I mean, do we need a new kind of crime, like an aggravated charge when it comes to violence against women and girls? Do we need a sort of prevent for extreme misogyny that's incubating in all these boys' bedrooms? Let's have a listen to what Keir seemed to suggest.
Britain now faces a new threat. Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like al-Qaeda. That threat, of course, remains. But now, alongside that, we also see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom, accessing all manner of material online, desperate for notoriety.
Yes, and who are these loners, misfits and young men in their bedrooms targeting? We know who they're targeting. We know, and the judge knew, because describing the events of the 29th of July, he said Rudakubana knew there was to be a Taylor Swift-themed yoga and dance workshop where very young girls were to enjoy an organised party safely in an upstairs room where the organisers were to look after them. There were 26 children at the party, all of them happy and enjoying themselves. He targeted those children for the horrific, extreme violence he was intent upon. So he's sort of saying it, but not really saying the quiet part out loud enough for me. I want much more acknowledgement that this was a targeting of girls. This was an act of femicide and extreme misogyny. But let's continue to listen to Mr. Goose from Southport. He continued.
At 11:45 that morning, he arrived and walked straight into the building, up the stairs to where he could hear the sound of happy children. In his mind was the intention to murder as many of them as he physically could. He wanted to try and carry out mass murder of innocent, happy young girls. And over about 15 minutes, he savagely killed 3 of them and attempted to kill 8 more, as well as 2 adults who tried to stop him. It was of such extreme violence, of the utmost and exceptionally high seriousness, that it is difficult to comprehend why it was done.
That's the last clip we're going to play from Mr. Goose. He also said, though, that the crime was sadistic, which suggests the judge thought that the perpetrator took pleasure in his barbarity. And we got to, again, just look again. The barbarity was against whom? It wasn't against boys and men. And though, of course, many died in the Manchester Arena bombing, none died in Southport. So it was little girls and it was women. And I think we have to look at this. What is it about modern British society that can incubate such evil? What's in the petri dish? I'm thinking a dash of Andrew Tate, Islamism, frustration, sexual frustration, of course, and then, of course, testosterone, because people said that he changed when he got to around 13. So what incubated this pound shop, pathetic Manchester Arena knockoff wannabe, and what turned him into one of the worst murderers in modern British history? The defence said, yes, they said this: he did make a transition from a normal, well-disciplined child to someone who is capable of committing acts of shocking and senseless violence. Something changed in him when he reached the age of 13. So my question is, were these little girls killed because of their sex? And if so, what do we need to change when it comes to the law? I think it needs a societal change, not just a legal change. Would a new category, as the Labour Party is suggesting, of extreme misogyny falling into the terrorism legislation really change anything? My question to you is, should we actually change the offence and the definitions? Or do we need to change the whole culture? 0345 6060973 is the number. We just want to hear, finally, I think, from the mother of Elsie Dot Stancombe, who again stressed, and you hear these people who've been so affected by this terrible atrocity keep saying it was little girls, keep saying this, and yet the institutional response is just, it's kind of not terrorism. I don't think that's good enough. I don't think that I don't think it answers the huge questions that this case throws up. This was not an act of impulse, it was premeditated, Jenny Stancombe said in her statement, which was read out. You chose that place, that time and those circumstances, knowing that when we arrived, all we would see was the aftermath of the devastation caused. We were robbed of the opportunity to protect our girls, and so on. Yes, just a quick clip from Jenny Stancombe.
You deliberately chose that place, fully aware that there would be no parents present, fully aware that girls were vulnerable and unable to protect themselves. We were robbed of the opportunity to protect our girls. It was the act of a coward.
It so was. Well said, Jenny Stancombe. And then, of course, Leanne Lucas, we can't find the audio. I don't know if it exists, says that she now can't walk down the street as a 36-year-old woman feeling safe. And she will feel to the end of her days that she failed to protect the little girls in her dance class. So this is my takeaway. And I wonder what yours is. It's my contention, and it's actually my fear, that this was more about hatred of women and girls than terrorism. It wasn't colour or creed or politics or race. It was gender, actually, that drove this young man to do what he did. The only thing he could do to make himself feel big and strong and powerful and male was to kill little girls, as many as he could. That was the only point and purpose of his actions. It was femicide. It was gender-based violence. And I think for that to change, we just need to do more than change the definition of terrorism. But what about you?